everyone. Thank you for joining. So, my name is Harika, and I think most of you know me. And I'm working as product owner in one of the Equifax UC products. So, today I'm going to speak about Agile Sprint ceremonies. I know most of you know every ceremony that we are following. Just I would try to make a difference by what to do and what not to do. So, and how do they actually streamline the development process? So, yeah, I'll just start. So, most of you know the meaning of agile, right? So, the dictionary meaning would be like, it means the ability to change quickly and rapidly. So, it's quite adaptable. So, why do we have agile in IT products? So, agile is to have the frequent delivery of small chunks of functionality from different teams and always attain the feedback from customer and act over the feedback. That is how most of the IT products move to agile. So most of you might be knowing about the agile principles. So the 11 principles, I'm not going to talk about them today, but I would just add how agile values are important in an IT product. So agile values usually, they have always been more valuing the individuals and interactions over the processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. It doesn't mean that the things on right side are always ignored or deprioritized, but our main motto and focus is with agile, the left side part. Okay. I hope I'm making this clear and just stop me if anyone has any questions. Moving on to the next slide. So just a basic introduction to all the basics in the Agile and Scrum framework. So there are lot many Agile frameworks we have in the market like Kanban, Scrum, Extreme Programming, Crystal Programming, Dynamic Systems and Development Programming, Feature-Driven Development. So I have just hands-on with Scrum framework and the Kanban. Today I'm going to discuss only with the Scrum framework. So this is the dictionary definition of Scrum framework. Scrum refers to lightweight framework that is used in every industry to deliver complex, innovative products and services that truly delight the customers. It's always simple to understand, but difficult to master. So it's easy, like I can define these sprint ceremonies, etc., but while following we have a lot of issues coming up from most of the teams, right? So and the term sprint, which is again well known to everyone. Sprint is the basic element of Scrum framework. Usually it is also known as iteration or time box. The time period for a sprint is 1 week, 2 weeks, or the maximum sprint is 4 weeks, but most generically used sprint time box is for 2 weeks, which is globally followed. Of course, it can be a week or 4 weeks. And these are the different Scrum roles we have. Product owner, who defines and breaks down the project backlog into multiple stories, and the Scrum Master, who ensures to follow all the sprint ceremonies and aligns the team, and the development team to who executes the project. So the dev and the QEs fall into development team. Hope I'm making things clear. So
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Harika.
thank you. So today I'm just going to discuss on these ceremonies: daily scrum, sprint planning, backlog refinement, sprint review, sprint retrospective. So this is a generic example of a 2-week sprint, how these ceremonies are aligned. Of course, 90% of projects would follow the same plan who are into Scrum framework ideally. So every Wednesday we start with iteration planning. Of course, not every Wednesday, bi-weekly. So daily we have the daily stand-up calls. We call it team sync, daily Scrum, daily huddles, etc. You call, right? And in the middle of sprint, we have something called backlog refinement. And just before ending of the sprint, we'll have sprint review meeting. And the last but not least, iteration retrospective, which is most important. So I'm going to discuss all how we actually implement these ceremonies while we are into the Scrum framework. Moving on to the next slide. So daily sync or daily Scrum meeting. So everybody knows this, right? Every morning, or if you are working on US projects, you'll have in the evening. So it's usually a 15-minute event. We always have a progression towards sprint goal, and we'll always have an actionable plan for the day on each and every individual. So ideally, the daily scrum call helps to align the team, what everyone is working on, and what are different blockers or impediments that any of the team member is facing, and can we get some solution kind of. So it's always advisable to have all the team gathered, and the attendees are Scrum team, which includes product owner, Scrum master, and the technical team. So the important topic I would talk about daily sync meeting is, anti-pattern, which is common what we shouldn't be doing during a daily Scrum call. Daily Scrum call should never last more than 15 minutes. It's an unbreakable rule, because we call it daily stand-up. I hope most of you know that we call it as daily stand-up. Earlier, previously when we used to go to offices before COVID, we used to meet in offices directly, not through Teams, etc. So it's called as daily stand-up so that the meeting should be very short enough so that everyone can comfortably hold while standing. So, and main in motto of this call is that we shouldn't be wasting a lot of tech team's time. This is just kind of aligning things in a way what team is working on. And even from the participants, they should be giving the gist of updates without getting long-winded. So they should be giving a crisp update of each, what they are doing, what they have done yesterday, what they are doing today, and if they have any impediments, that should be in a briefly defined manner. In the same way, if there are some impediments or blockers, we should never, turn these daily scrum meetings into a brainstorming session or, a kind of problem solving session, as it sidetracks most of the issues which needs the attention, and it's a lot of time waste to other team member who are in. So it's always best practice to address these impediments is to have a meet after session. So the product owner or the scrum master would be setting up a different meet, or after the 15-minute scrum, they can actually continue. Whoever the required team in can actually stay back or meet after the scrum call. But we should never use the daily stand-up meeting as long-running brainstorming sessions or problem-solving sessions. I hope it's clear. And any questions?
Let's say we have a team of like 20. Can we break it into chunks and do a stand up?
I don't know who is asking this, but
This is
ideally,
Surya Kumari.
hey, hi. So ideally, we should never run such long team.
Okay.
Whenever we're following this scrum, it should be 8 maximum number. Yes, as you asked, you have the answer too. We always need to break the call into 2 different parts. So 8 to 10 is maximum, and 15 minutes is must rule, thumb rule for a scrum call.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, moving on to the next slide. So the first ceremony for a sprint is sprint planning. So the time box is usually for 4 hours or even less based on the team strength. So ideally, the product owners would be leading this iteration planning meeting. So agenda is this. Actually, while discussing about sprint planning, it'll obviously take more time, but I'll try to brief it each line within just two statements. I'll try to brief it, and in case anyone has any questions, we can discuss further. So the first and foremost agenda of sprint planning is to establish the capacity. So the product owners usually collaborate with the technical team or the system architect and selects the highest priority items to implement in the sprint. So each team member again will be determining their availability and acknowledging their time offs as well. So like if say suppose we have 5 people in a team, and they should be acknowledging their availability throughout the sprint during sprint planning call. And in such cases, how do we give the capacities? Say, suppose it's a 2 week sprint, and we have 5 team members, and we usually, value the efforts and story points. I hope well-known thing to most of you. So on per head, if we assume it's 8 story points, so the capacity is 5 into 8, 40 story points. In case of any holidays or time offs from any of the individuals, we should be ensuring to cut at least 1 story point from each of the team, and the maximum story points that we can evaluate for a sprint is 35 story points, not 40 story points. That is how we'll need to balance the capacity management as a product owner. And the second point would be, of course, the second and third would be similar: story analysis and estimating and detailing the stories. So usually, most of the teams, I think you play a game called as planning poker. You bring a deck of cards and stories written on it, and they can development team can choose a card, and product owner reads it out, and based on the discussions, someone who is good to pick that will pick it up and give their estimates. So I personally follow the Zira tool rather than the planning poker games and all. So in the Zira, we usually have stories in the backlog created by product owners, and we will read out each story, and to ensure the objective what we are going to achieve through the story is clear to each and every team member, and we will leave the story estimation to the development team. So the development team will be giving their estimates. So how many story points would they actually give to a story will be given by development team. And the story points are relative, so there's no specific measure for them. Like one developer can do it in a half day, and some other may take 2 to 3 days to get the task done. So it's always advisable, whatever developer says, that effort should be given to the task. Okay, and developing iteration goals is the next agenda. So why do we need to have iteration goals? Is that the entire team, as a team, we should have the clarity that what we are going to achieve at the end of sprint. So the main purpose is to align team members to common purpose, what we are going to achieve in the team, as a team within the sprint, and align all the team to a common objective. Like we are focusing to deliver this feature by end of this sprint, or part of this feature by end of this sprint. That is how we need to have the stories in place. And it also provides a lot of transparency, like who is owning what, kind of will be uh, clearly mentioned in the iteration goal. And committing to iteration goals is the next agenda item. Like as a team, we must be committing before we start the sprint that by doing everything what we can actually do, like within the sprint we can complete, and we can even raise the concerns if that particular story is not feasible to do within the sprint. If so, how? So it's always like the team should be committing to the iteration goal set. Okay, I just briefed each of them, and the attendees of sprint planning team, sorry, the sprint planning call are the Scrum team, and we can always pull in the subject matter experts like system architects, or if it is functionality related, functional heads, as in when required into the sprint planning call, but they're not mandated. Any questions here?
Yes.
Harika, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Shruti, please go on.
I'm sorry, Shishudhar, you can please.
No, no, she is telling a lot of story points. So we have a lot of new joiners who would, I don't think they know about the story points. So, Harika, could you please break the story points? What exactly it is?
Okay. So I can I just quote how our
Yeah,
project uses the story point estimation? Okay.
that will be helpful.
Uh, okay. So we within UC have the story point estimation as one story point equals to half a day. Okay. During the sprint planning, we always ensure that the story is clear and the objective is clear, and ask the developer his effort in how many days will he be able to get that done. Okay, if it takes half day, one story point he'll give. So we will always reach out to the QA team, the testing team. So how much time would they take for testing? So based on that, we usually give the story points. If they say they need half more day, it's altogether 2. And we always give the story points in Fibonacci series, uh, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Okay, not in a line. That is because there is something called, vertical cake slicing, they call it. So we usually have quarterly planning meetings, etc. So every team will have quarterly goals to achieve, which is called PI planning, program incremental planning. So always, we'll ensure to have cutting all the layers of cake instead of horizontal cutting. So that is the reason they'll ensure to have, they touch each and everything, like, the development, how much time for deployment. So that is how they actually go for Fibonacci series. Seshodhar, do you
Yeah.
think I can add anything
Yes,
else
yes,
to the story point?
that's helpful actually. Thank you, Harika.
Thank you. Shruti?
I had the same question. It was regarding story points. So I was not able to determine how do we actually consider story points within a story. So it's the number of tasks that is involved in each story. Is that how we consider it as a story point?
No, actually, based on effort. Like, you can define your own, like, as I just quoted my example, like in UC, we follow one story point equals to half day effort of a developer.
Okay,
So,
so story and the story point, right?
yes, yes.
Okay, okay, got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So what are the best approaches and common do nots for a sprint planning call? So the source for these is from Scaled Agile. So I haven't modified anything. So I would rather read them out, and just, in case of anything needs an attention, just let me know. So the best approaches are review and reprioritize the team backlog ahead of iteration planning. It's always advisable. The product owner have the backlog refinement call. If it is a first sprint, then that is okay. Product owner can actually define the terms. If not, always have a backlog refinement call to understand what can be done for the further sprints, and clearly communicate the story details and priorities to ensure understanding and alignment. This is mandate thing again, like, what needs to be done. The clear objective must be defined. Maintain neutrality so as not to influence the team to overcome it. We should never be overcommitting, because, even it is okay to slow down. We cannot overcommit the things, and it's kind of overburdening our entire team. Should ensure that we go balanced way, and Prior to iteration planning, prepare some preliminary iteration goals based on team's progress in PI. So at the end, it's always we target to achieve the quarterly goals, which is called program increment. So this is program increment, PI planning. As an organization, every quarter, every 3 months, we'll have these PI meetings, and every team comes up with some goals that they will be delivering these so and so features by end of the quarter. So the product owners and the team will be working together in such a way that they intend to reach the PI goals rather than the sprint goals. So it should be like progressing towards the PI goal as well as the sprint goal. Apply capacity allocation to the team backlog to make prioritizing unlike work easier. So it's always advisable to have 2 sprints planned instead of one sprint. There will be a lot of dependencies, right? It will not be done in a sprint, and there might be some continuation tasks. So always ensure to have minimum of 2 backlogs filled in for a sprint board. These are the best approaches that are defined in scaled agile, and what we shouldn't be doing during sprint planning call. So delving too deep into technical discussion, it's just a sprint planning call. We cannot, discuss the entire architecture in that call. If a story is unclear, on a high level, they can get the information. If no, it still needs further discussions. It's always preferable to have different call. Prioritize stories don't align to business objectives or teams PI objectives. So if we are working on a story at the end, it should be, adding some value either to the sprint goal or to the PI goal. Okay, we cannot bring in something which is irrelevant. Bring in stories that haven't been refined or prioritized. Suddenly, on the day of sprint planning, we cannot have some ad hoc stories in place. Whatever we planned in backlog refinement should be prioritized or bringing up in the sprint board. PO directing the team on how the work should be done. So product owners are there to prioritize the things, but not how to do. So we have some technical teams like system architects and development folks who should be actually working on that part. Product owners should never be getting into that zone. The team undercommits due to the fear of failure. So you can't overcome it, or you cannot actually undercommit. So and no time is reserved for support activities. So ideally, in our project, we have something called a production churn ticket. It's like a placeholder story. It will not be assigned to anyone, but we'll have a separate effort, at least 5 story points for each sprint. In case some production support activity pops in, we may not anticipate few of the maintenance activities, right? They may come into place. So in such cases, we always use the production support ticket, which is a churn ticket. So instead of adding stories in middle of sprint, we always have this buffer ticket. We may even have the bugs in place, right? So that is how we accommodate the support activities. Any questions on the best approaches and anti-patterns?
Sarika.
Okay, the next slide we have is backlog refinement. So this is like a kind of preview and elaboration of upcoming stories. So this will be held during middle of middle of the sprint. The time duration is from 1 hour to 2 hours based on team's velocity again. The main purpose of this backlog refinement is, the team should be able to think about the new stories before sprint planning call. So the sprint planning call and the sprint start day are the same. So it's always advisable to have stories in place for the next sprint on the backlog refinement call itself. Or within that span, team can always reach back to the product owner to have or prioritize the stories in place for the next sprint. Provides enough time to identify and resolve dependencies and issues that could impact the next iteration. So always we can, raise any kind of dependencies with external teams or any issues from the tech teams during the backlog refinement call, so that things cannot be brought up during the middle of sprint that we have dependency with so and so external team. That is the reason why we are unable to do this. So such kind of things, if they are anticipating something, they should be brought up during backlog refinement itself. uh, and the team can improve stories and acceptance criteria and identify the missing information. So as usual, we have the stories in place, and we'll go one by one, uh, which are in the sprint board. And if we need to groom the stories a little with technical details, the tech team can always pitch in and add the details. And the acceptance criteria is unclear, the QA team can come and ask that is not clear, and we want a clear acceptance criteria, and we have to be ready to groom that. And in case there is some missing information, tech teams can ask. We can always refine or groom the stories. And most of the focus is in the next iteration, but it allows time to discuss future iteration. My sincere advice would be two iterations in advance instead of one iteration. I know it takes time, but always better to discuss two iterations in a call rather than going with one iteration planning. Okay. Any questions, anyone? Okay. Moving on to next. So as I said, these are all again from Scaled Agile. So what are best approaches and anti-patterns for backlog refinement call? Best approaches would be revisit stories as often as the need to finalize and commit them into iteration planning. So it's purely the responsibility of product owner and tech teams reaching out to product owner in case they need more stories in place, because the product owner may be technical or maybe non-technical. We can define the things on a high level, and the technical team may come up like it can be broken down into more stories and more effort is needed. Kind of things should always be brought up during backlog refinement call. Maintain the right level of a team deep backlog versus team ready backlog for two iterations. Yeah, this is one of the best approach we follow in our team too. So team backlog versus ready team backlog. I mean the coming up sprint and the further sprint. It's always good to have two iterations planning in place. Make sure all the team members participate. So we should always have the dev technical team, completely the testing team in place. Invite the right subject matter experts. So yeah, the system architects or the functional owners we should be having in place for backlog refinement call to define the value. And if we are estimating it wrong, they are always there to correct us. Hold the event on regular cadence. So it's always advisable to have all these calls in place for next 2 to 3 quarters, and we do not miss them, because these actually typically have kind of goal towards a quarter or an year product. So we never, it's better not to miss these calls. And the common anti-patterns for backlog refinement call. So arriving to the iteration with stories that are not ready. So we cannot bring the ad hoc stories again. It should have a defined objective that we are reaching some PI objective, PI goal. Completing team backlog refinement on inconsistent basis. So any call, not just backlog refinement call, we should have an appropriate summary that what we plan to. So we shouldn't leave the call abruptly. Team sees the stories for the first time during the iteration. So I know, I don't know if most of you actually joined the PI planning calls. So during that, high level stories would be defined, which is a quarterly planning call. Of course, most of the dev teams and POs will be joining that. And From that, we break down each features or epics into a lot of small stories. Apart from that, we cannot bring sudden surprises in the sprint. You have to work on this, which is in the next PI, etc. kind of. So we should always go with a goal, specific goal. And feature estimations impact story estimations. So the pattern is like an epic will be defined, a high level functionality. From that, we always have features in place, kind of functionalities. I can simplify it. So each feature will be broken down into multiple stories. So I can say feature is just a high level functionality definition we have, while the story will have multiple efforts like, the development effort, testing, and the deployment into multiple environments. So we have a lot of things involved. We can never give the same estimate of feature that if someone says that feature can be delivered within 10 days, it's not the same, right? We have lot many processes here and lot many chunks of stories broken down from a feature. So never ever the feature estimate and the story estimates are same. These are the best approaches and common anti-patterns of backlog refinement call. Any questions?
Precious, you can ask questions.
They might be still worrying what am I talking about. Okay, no issues. Even if anyone has questions, they can reach out to me anytime. Okay. Um, Moving on to next slide. Iteration or sprint review, which is actually like, showing our progress made in each sprint. And, it is like, team will demonstrate all the stories they worked on. Uh, it is kind of a working functionality demonstration. Attendees would be the entire team and the stakeholders. We call it sprint demos. So every sprint, the team will be demoing something that they have worked on. And it's always advisable to have the key stakeholders. Even clients will be involved in the sprint demos. And team demonstrates everything that they have worked on, story, spike, or NFR. So NFR is not functionality requirements. Spike is like an enabler story, which means analysis story, I can say. And the time box of this call is for 1 or 2 hours. So based on this call, we get the customer feedback and attend it back, and we have the stories in place with the feedback. And again, team will get a chance to rework or enhance anything based on the feedback we have. So agenda of this call would be, we should be always reviewing the sprint goals that we defined before we start the sprint. So what we have planned versus what we have achieved today, and demo and solicit feedback on each story or spike or NFR. So demonstration is must. Every team member will be actually participating in this. Discuss the stories not completed and why. So we have to go back to the board always in the review, and if something is not completed, why was it, so we should be able to discuss it openly in front of team. And if someone can actually pitch in to help or advise it, we should always allow the team to discuss it. And from the product management team, uh, the incomplete stories, we may actually carry forward it if there is no effort spent on that story. If there is some effort spent on the story, we can split it into 2 stories. We can always clone the story. Or if it needs to have more effort and different things are added, like, you need to work on different other criteria. In such cases, it's always advisable to link the stories and create new stories as a continuation. And identify the risks and impediments. Of course, this is as usual done. Revise the team backlog as needed. So based on this review, most of the stories will be pushed to next sprint in case of not done, or continuation stories will be created. And we'll again review the team's backlog, which we have in backlog refinement call. Any questions with sprint review?
Harika, is that not mandatory that all the stories created in the sprint should be closed at the end of the sprint?
That is, again, of course, we do plan in such way, but sometimes we may have external dependencies, right? Obviously, or some days, sometimes, something else is broken, which caused our team to stop our working. So, which are unpredictable. In such cases, we have to move some of the stories to next sprint. So, there's no thumb rule that we have to have 100% velocity.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Anyone else, any questions?
Yeah, Harika, what comes first in Agile, like sprint planning or backlog refinement?
Sprint planning is the first day of sprint. So if you're working on a fresh team, the backlog will be built by product owner. Backlog refinement starts in the middle of sprint. So planning is like we share the basic stories if it is a fresh team and a new product. If it is an existing team, right, we always have the backlog refinement calls.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Pawan. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to next slide. Uh, of course, the last one, the iteration or sprint retrospective. Anything we do, it's always advisable to have a retrospection. So, which is used for relentless improvement, which is continual improvement. It's kind of obtaining the feedback. So here again, I can say no clients will be involved. It's purely for the team and by the team. So one can use the retrospective as summary points, but shouldn't be limiting to those. So if we conclude something in the iteration retrospective, it doesn't mean that it's the final and final things that we need to improve. So we again have something from management, something from clients as a feedback every time throughout the sprint. That's why we call this as agile. So continuously we have to change, based on the feedbacks. And this is usually time boxed for 30 to 60 minutes. And product owners always ensure to enter the improvement items as backlog. We have to create backlog stories, whatever discussions made, and people will bring up like this has been missed. So such kind of things we should always bring up as action items for the backlog. And of course, agenda, we have both quantitative and qualitative. um, I think the quantitative would actually go with the sprint boards basically. So review the improvement of backlog items targeted for this iteration. Were they all accomplished? What we have planned versus what we have completed. If not completed, why? If completed, appreciate them. And did the team meet goals? So we put some iteration goals during sprint planning. So by end of the sprint, we are going to deliver this entire feature, a completely tested feature, into production. Did we meet that? Yes, appreciate it. If not, why and what action items we have for the further sprints. Review the agreed to iteration metrics. So I just quoted an example like we have 5 members team and 8 story points each. So we had a plan of 40 story points per sprint. Did we achieve all the 40 story points? If it is really good, 100% velocity, well, good. We had a very good planning. If not, why? What were the impediments? Try to address them. And what our qualitative agenda is, you always ask this question to team. What really went well throughout the sprint? What didn't go well? And what can be done better next time? So it's like getting feedback within the team and trying to improve continuously based on those feedbacks. So I think this finishes all the sprint ceremonies. Anyone has any questions with this retrospective? And the thumb rule for this retrospective is that the product owner or the scrum master should be making the team as free as they can, because they have to openly speak up whether they felt something went wrong in the sprint. They should be a team should be openly speaking up, and we should always be ready to take that feedback. Any questions?
Hi, Harika. This is Surya. Not on the lines of retrospective, but I have a question on this story points.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you said that production issues, if they come in, we have some breathing story points, right?
Mhm.
Like set aside for them. And is there any scenario where that has been exceeded? And if
Uh,
yes, how is that
yes.
been handled with the sprint?
Yeah, sometimes, of course, we may need to exceed the points, but at the same time, the development team is also smart enough to deprioritize some other story. So they always push back some other story. They give us like this takes precedence over this. So this is high priority. Can you please push this current sprint story into backlog? So we all always manage like this. We try to prioritize the things better, like which takes precedence, what should be done or completed first. So yeah, many times it happens. But at such times, people will not be extending, right? They give us what takes precedence and give the story estimates.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone? So I just briefed them all, something we follow religiously in our project. So, and of course, anyone has something different they are following, you can actually discuss it openly here. That adds more value. And any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Harika. So,
Yeah.
if the developer takes all the time in the sprint to just for development, so what do we do in that case?
You mean not giving the time for testing?
Yeah, we are getting to end of the sprint and only development is done. So,
Yeah.
what do we do?
In such cases, of course, as I just said, story points are not just relative and they do not have a precise value. So you committed that, the development and testing would take 8 story points. But unfortunately, you had to analyze more and, get deeper into the code and make in n number of changes to the code. So that actually exceeds the development effort as well. You can always highlight such situations and ask product owner either to clone the story or split the story for the further sprints. As I said, there's no thumb rule that everything is strict here. Uh, it's just Agile. We can do as we, based on the situations, we can always, either split the story, clone the story, or have a separate story. That's okay. Carry forward
Okay,
stories to
so
next
what
sprint.
would be the better option of these three? So carry the ticket to next sprint
Uh,
and use it for
that
testing, or
that depends on the effort spent, Ishwar. Like, say, suppose you have spent almost all the time, just left for testing. In such case, you can't carry entire 8 story points to next sprint. Rather, if you strongly believe that you have put an entire 8 story point effort from your end, you may ask the product owner to create a new story or clone the story so that you can even still complete the remaining work and give it to testing. And you can share the efforts too, or split the story. If you think, this part of development work you have done can be tested, this is done, this functionality half part is done, it can be tested. In such case, you can groom the story and have a story, split story into next sprint. And you had a strong blocker because of which you haven't even touched the coding part. In such scenarios, it's always advisable to carry forward the story. Hope I made clear.
yes, Harika. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishwar. Anyone, any other questions?
Harika, I have one question related to the efforts.
Okay.
So the thing is like the developer like will be combinedly giving the story points for the dev and QA. So unfortunately, like
Yes.
the QA efforts also need two times. That is like, for example, in some cases, like we won't be having some offshore team is not having the UAT production access. So to get that sign off, either we need to test them in the lower environments and we'll be assigning it to another QA, or else to be BUs, business users basically. So how can we track our efforts over there? So the ticket will be moved from our board, and even like we'll not be having that one. So how to track the business users efforts, or else the second QA efforts, like who is going to take?
Understand, but everything will be captured in the history of a story, right? And we'll have always the comments. Of course, while estimating the story, it's always advisable to get developer as well as the QA efforts. So if it requires complete regression testing in QA, as well as multiple environments like UAT, in such cases, you know QAs can actually pitch in and give their entire effort. Of course, though the story is carry forwarded, it doesn't mean that developer has done nothing when his story moves into in test, or it will be taken care by one QA resource in lower and one QA resource in upper environment. So it's like we can track the things in history of the ticket, and the effort is never lost. Of course, when a story is assigned to a person, the effort is always calculated.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. I hope it's a no. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, Harika.
Thank you,
Thank you, Harika.
Harika.
Thank you,
Just a
Harika.
moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Thank you, Harika.
thank you, Harika. And team, I'm going to share a feedback form in the chat box. Okay. Please fill the feedback form right now and then leave the session.
Okay,
Okay.
someone has. Okay.
If you have any questions, you can ask now. So fill the feedback form. Just now shared.
I think Pavan, you shared something, right? The story
Story
points. That is,
points.
yeah, that is specific to only our UC project, Pavan. So that is the reason I didn't mention this. This is something religiously followed in, it's based on project,
Yeah,
I
it's
got it
not
from
different
that.
for
Google, Harika.
us.
Yeah, it's not global, but this is what we follow. Like,
Okay.
If you have any questions, you can ask, or else please fill the form and then you can leave the session.
Sure.
Thank you so much, Harika. It was a really helpful session.
thank you, Shruti. I know you're all aware of these things, but thanks for joining.
No, it's not that once we learn and we remember it always, but then frequently if we talk about this, it just stays in our mind for a little longer. So that is how it helps. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shruti. Okay. I hope everyone got. Thank you. Thank you, Pravina, for
Yeah.
organizing. Bye.
Bye,
Thank you,
Pravina.
Harika.
Thank you for
Yeah. Bye
organizing.
bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye, guys.
Bye. యశోధర్ అండ్ వంశీ ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ అవ్వలేదు ఇంకా మీరు చేయకుండా ఎందుకు లీవ్ అయిపోయారు ఆ? ఎందుకు లీవ్ అయిపోయారు
Done, ma'am. Thank you.
ఓకే బాయ్